Number one, what is the point of doing conversion? So I want to make sure you understand why I'm making you do this, because I know it's miserable. So why do them? The reason we do them is because frequently the unit you measure with is not the unit you calculate with. And so you can't calculate it until you have it in the correct unit. So measured units don't always match units for calculation. So, in the lab you guys did, you measured things in centimeters, but you can't calculate things in centimeters. You actually have to use meters for those. You can come back to the lab. So you need to have the correct units. If you're wondering, well, Mr. B, why can't I use centimeters? Aren't centimeters cool enough units? No, they're not. The reason you can't use centimeters is because gravity is in meters per second squared. You can't use centimeters because you have to use gravity when you're solving, and so you can't use a unit that doesn't jive with it. Got to have jivey units. Okay. Number two, what are the important prefixes? There are lots of prefixes. I'm only going to tell you the ones that matter because I'm a wonderful human being. Here's the ones that matter. Kilo. Okay, centi, milli, micro, and nano. When I talk about prefixes, I'm talking about any of these five. So frequently I'll talk about prefixes. These are the ones I'm talking about. Okay, moving right along. What are some of the units that we're going to be using most often? The ones we're going to use most often are going to be mass, which is measured in grams, distance, which is measured in meters, and time, which is measured in seconds. So, let's talk about how to do conversions. The way you do conversions is you start with a unit that you have, you figure out what unit you need to go to, and then you figure out a number that relates them together. For example, okay? If I want to know how many pennies I have in $2, okay? I need to turn my number of dollars into pennies. I have $2. I need to turn them into pennies. Does anyone have any idea how many pennies are in $2? 200. Nice! And how do you know that?
Because 100 pennies is $1.
Exactly. Perfect. 100 pennies is $1. We have to do that exact same thing when we convert. So let's do one that's harder than pennies, but easier than what we're going to do next. Hours. 3.5 hours into seconds. So to do this conversion, here's how I do it. I start with the number I have, 3.5 hours. I figure out what number do I need to go to. Well, I need to go to seconds, but I don't know how many seconds are in an hour. I knew how many pennies were in $1. I don't know how many seconds are in an hour. Okay, don't worry. Don't freak out about that. What do you know goes into hours? Stick with it, Ethan. You're on a roll.
60 minutes in an hour.
There are 60 minutes in an hour. So the way you do this is what you had goes in the bottom. What you want goes in the top. So 60 minutes and 1 hour. And if you're wondering, does the number go in the top? No, the number follows the unit. The unit you have goes in the bottom. The unit you want goes in the top. I put 60 minutes in the top because minutes was in the top. I put 1 hour in the bottom because hours were on the bottom. There's no trick to the numbers where they go. They follow the unit. Okay, I still don't want minutes as my final answer. I want seconds, so I'm going to do this again. Minutes go on the bottom. What I had goes on the bottom. What I want goes on the top. And I know that there's 60 seconds in a minute. So, how do I get the answer? You multiply everything in the top, divide by everything in the bottom. So, 3.5, there we go, 3.5 times what's on the top divided by the bottom, times 60 divided by 1, times what's on the top divided by the bottom, times 60 divided by 1, I get 12,600. Now I know what you're saying to yourself. Mr. B, why did you divide by 1? I know any number divided by 1 is whatever the number is. I just wanted to prove a point. That's how you do the math. You multiply the top, divide by the bottom. Frequently, either the top or the bottom will be 1. In fact, almost always. So if you want to skip the ones and just say, okay, multiply by the top. If there's a number in the bottom, divide by that number. That's fine. I just want to show you how I do it. Times, divide, until you get your answer. Any questions for me so far? Okay. Turn to the back page. Number 5. Convert 6,700 centimeters into kilometers and show your work. So just like we did before, we're going to start by writing the number down. So here we go. The number I'm starting with, 6,700 centimeters. Okay. I need to figure out what I'm going to. Now, I'm going to kilometers. Now, just like with time, we need to have something to compare it to. If I want to go from centimeters to kilometers, I need to know how many centimeters are in a kilometer. Just like most of you do not know how many minutes are in a year. So you can't go straight to minutes. You got to go to days and hours and so on and so forth. I do know how many centimeters are in a kilometer, but I'm weird. You probably don't. So we need to know something we can compare it to. And this is where we're going to jump back up to number 2. All right. We have our prefixes. We need to compare all of these to something. And the thing we're going to compare them to is something called the base. Something called a base unit. So this is a base unit. These are prefix units. And we're going to need a number that tells us how many of these are equal to this. And if you're wondering what are the base units are these guys here. So grams, meters, seconds, those are our base units. So what are the values for these base units? Well, for every 1 kilo, 1 centi, 1 milli, 1 micro, 1 nano. And it could be a nanosecond, it could be a microsecond, it could be a centigram, it could be a kilometer. It doesn't matter. For whatever this is, there are this many of the base. And these are the numbers you want to write down. Okay? For every 1 kilo, there's 10 to the third base units. For every 1 centi, there's 10 to the negative 2. Milli is 10 to the negative 3. Micro is 10 to the negative 6. Nano is 10 to the negative 9. Okay? I'll give you a chance to write those down. So, what this means is 1 nanometer equals 10 to the negative 9th meters. 1 microsecond equals 10 to the negative 6 seconds. 1 kilogram equals 10 to the negative 3rd grams. One prefix unit of any type equals that number of base units of any type. So, coming back here to this. What I have goes in the bottom. What I want goes in the top. I started with a prefix unit. So my prefix unit goes in the bottom, centimeters. Now I want to get to kilometers, but I don't know how many centimeters are in a kilometer. I know how many centimeters are in a meter. So I'm going to go to meters next, not to kilometers. Just like I didn't know how many seconds were in an hour, but I did know how many minutes were in an hour. That's what I'm doing here. I don't know how many centimeters are, I don't know how many centimeters are in a kilometer. I do know how many there are in a meter. Okay? So there's centimeters. Sorry, let me keep my color distinctions the same. That's a terrific color. Brown and purple, or orange and purple mix great. Okay. Now, what numbers go where? The prefix unit, centi, gets a 1. The base unit for centi, okay, go across, 10 to the negative 2. Okay? Centis are gone. Now we need to go to my next one. I have meters. I'm going to kilometers. So the base unit goes on the bottom. It's what I had. I'm going to kilometers, so that's a prefix unit that goes on the top. Okay? Now I look at my numbers. Okay, for 1 kilo, I have 10 to the 3rd base units. For every 1 kilo, I have 10 to the 3rd base units. Okay? Now I'm ready to do the math. I multiply things across the top. I divide things on the bottom. 6,700 times 10 to the negative 2. This is where you may need help figuring out how to put it in your calculator. 6,700 times 10. My power button is this guy here. Okay? Some calculators, the power button may look like this. Y to the X. Some, it may look like this. X with a little box above it. Whoop, there. X with a little box above it. Some may look like this. X to the Y. Don't ask me why Y is 1X and 1's XY. There you go. It may be different. Okay? So if you don't know how to put it in, let me know. Here's mine, though. This is 10 to the negative 2. I'm multiplying it by. So I wrote 10. Here's my power button on here for me, this guy. And now I put negative 2. I'm going to divide that by 10 to the 3rd. Divided by 10 to the 3rd. And there's my answer, 0.67. Sorry, 0.067.